Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. Sadly, we're not in the pub this week. We are still in isolation because Lockdown 2.0 has hit the UK. Gentlemen, how are you finding the first day of this new lockdown?
I'm hungover. Kel surprise, mate. Took full advantage of the fact we were allowed out for one more night last night. I went to Urban Golf, parred the first 2 holes, had 4 pints, and then I was subsequently awful after that. Didn't finish any hole on the back 9. So that's where I'm at. What about you, Pat?
No golf for me. Not really my quote unquote sport. I don't know. I'm settled in for it, to be honest. Like I've been resigned to it for a little bit of a while. So now I'm just kind of like gonna knuckle down, and hopefully Christmas will actually be possible this year, because otherwise it's gonna be pretty miserable run through to spring.
Anyway, let's crack on with the questions. But before we get into that, I should say this episode is brought to you by our friends at Budweiser, the official beer partner of the Premier League. And a quick reminder that Kings of the Premier League has returned to Sky Sports, and the panel will be using Sky's power rankings and Budweiser's King of the Match stats to debate each month's MVP. The latest episode features Jolien Lescott and Sam Queck. You can find that in the description below. Very quickly, guys, who was your King of the Month for October?
Well, Harry Kane's obviously up there. He was pretty prolific, wasn't he, in both departments, scoring and assisting. But I think Jack Grealish, for me, his all-round game, just beating his man for fun, isn't he? 4 assists, 3 goals, and his little socks make me weak at the knees. So, yeah, I'm going to go for Jackie Grealish.
I'm going to go for Diogo Jota. I mean, he's probably the most informed player on the best side in the Premier League at the moment. Obviously, a sensational performance in European football this week, but also 2 winners in successive Premier League games. Looks like he could pretty much do a job replacing almost anyone in that front line if he needs to. And I know that, Chris, you've written about how Liverpool can get him onto the field a little bit more this season. So I'm excited to see some of that.
I'm going to go for James Ward-Prowse, I think. Been incredibly impressed by Southampton at the start of this season. Obviously sitting 5th in the table, already taking 13 points ever since that Tottenham result, really, which actually probably could have gone either way. I know they ended up on the end of a battering, but at half-time they were the better side. Since then, they've just been sensational. James Ward-Prowse is getting better and better. I think it's 3 goals and an assist in his last 2 games. Obviously, 2 of those were those unbelievable free kicks. But yeah, I'll go for James Ward-Prowse at the moment. I just think Southampton have been unbelievable, and he's been the best player other than Danny Ings in the team. So as I said, those are selections, but you can see Jolien Lescott's and Sam Queck's by clicking the link in the description below. Anyway, let's get on with the show. Ardavan Hamisi has the first question, and it's a sad one for me. I'm not going to lie. Is it the end of the road for Ollie, and who else might go? So we're talking a little bit about the sack race here, I guess.
Yes.
At the moment, Ollie is odds on with the bookies as favourite to get the sack, but there's also, Slaven Bilic in there, there's Scotty Parker in there. Where do we want to start, Hamster?
Okay, let's go with Slaven Bilic, and we have used the bookies odds, haven't we, to try and be a little bit more fair, a little bit more objective, and these guys are rooted at the bottom, unfortunately, and I think it would have been a brave person to predict any other start for West Brom than they're currently going through. Well, at least in my opinion. I mean, they're 18th. They're on 3 points after 7 games at the time of recording, of course. And that includes 3 draws, 4 losses. And they're one of only 3 Premier League teams without a win. Now, expected points, which is understat.com, really interesting little resource. Go and have a look after this. Actually has them bottom. So they are statistically, in terms of, I suppose, the quality of chances they're creating versus the quality of chances they're conceding, the worst team at current in the Premier League. And they're only taking 8.4 shots a game. So it's not as if, Slaven Bilic is having a real go, which I suppose is a hallmark of his sides in the past, right? They've been pleasing on the eye. They've been possession heavy. They've been pretty good in the final third, but they're struggling in every department. Although they're only 0.2 behind Arsenal this term, which is, in terms of shots taken, which is pretty weird. And that is a good indicator that these things can change pretty quickly on a match-by-match basis, particularly at the start. So maybe don't read too much into it, but it's an early warning sign. They need to be a bit more proficient in attack. conceding a whopping 13.1 at the moment as well, which puts them around 15th. But I suppose you look at that, like I said a second ago, you look at the recruitment in the summer, they spent £30 million net. I don't know about you boys, but did you think they were preparing for anything else other than a dogfight, a probable return to the Championship, and it felt like they were rebuilding with that in mind? They were rebuilding for coming back up in a year, 2 years' time. I mean, they've got Gunnar on a permanent. I think Pereira and he cost around £20 million combined, which is very, very good business. Colin Grant cost around half of that, 30 million. He was 50 million pounds, because that is 30 divided by 2 for everyone at home. You're very, very welcome. Cheers, pal. And yeah, none of them are excelling at the moment. I mean, that would have been a tall order, wouldn't it? I think only Pereira is averaging over a shot and over a key pass per 90. So I don't know whether we should expect more from that sort of forward trident. I have been quite impressed with Dara O'Shea, though, who's not a comedian. He's a centre half, and he's the only player in the squad who's putting up sort of 5 defensive actions at the moment. I wouldn't say there's any outstanding candidates for like underperformers. So I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here, but it just feels like that squad isn't good enough to stay up. And in that sense, I probably think if they're not going to give Bilic the adequate resources, especially in the face of coronavirus, he should probably be allowed to take them back down and attempt to get them back up again when the club are on more sound financial footing. A little bit like Burnley did with Dyche, right? Because I just don't know who comes in. Like Joe, Pat, like, I don't know, Nigel Pearson maybe? Sam Allardyce, what a blast from the past that would be. But can you think of anyone that could save them in their current situation? I mean, we're only 7 games in, but still, pretty grim reading.
I hear where you're coming from, that I'm not sure where they turn, and I do partially agree with that. But do I think he should be allowed to take them down and bring back up? Probably not.
Fair enough.
I don't think his performances have inspired anything to suggest that should be allowed to happen. I mean, they've won 3 league games, I think, since February, including championship performances. They're all over the place in terms of team selection. There's clearly a rift between the manager and the board with the Hegazi sale behind his back. So I don't believe that Bilic is the man to carry them forward, to be honest with you. So if obviously it's not entirely his fault. You've already mentioned some really interesting points, good points about how he wasn't backed in the summer. The board clearly weren't prepared to spend the money in order to keep them in the division. Having said that, even in the Championship in 18 months' time, do I think that Bilic is the man to really galvanise this squad and take them forward? Probably not. So I would personally move on from Bilic. I think it's a massive game against Tottenham this weekend, and I don't think he'll survive it, sadly. The international break is always the culling period for managers, isn't it? And we are approaching it rapidly. What is it? November the 12th, I think, is that international break. So for me, I'd be surprised to see Bilic come out the other side as West Brom manager. And I feel a little bit sorry for him, to be honest with you, because the board has let him down to some level, even though he hasn't got the performances and the team selection right.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose Scott Parker may be in a similar sort of situation, having not been massively backed in the summer. I think their net spend was around £33 million as well, but they did utilise the loan market quite well. Do you think Scott Parker's going to outlive Bilic, Pat?
Probably. Oh, God, I don't know, man, because in a way, like Fulham are better than West Brom, but Fulham also can expect more than West Brom. Like, I look at this Fulham squad, and while they had a really weird summer window, I think the squad's actually kind of okay. Like, I don't think it's no worse than like a Burnley squad or something in my view. Now, there were weird moves in the summer. So obviously 10 mil went out the door on Anthony Knockaert, who then went out on loan pretty much immediately. That's a weird one. And it was a really weird use of resources as well. So I think they brought in Congolo, Joachim Anderson, and Tosin Adarabioyo from Man City. So that's like 3 centre-backs. They also brought in 3 full-backs in Kenny Tete Olaina and Anthony Robinson. They brought in Lamina and Harrison Reed in central midfield, plus Loftus-Cheek in on loan. Obviously as well, still have Anguissa, who came back from Villarreal. They've got Onuma as well. It just feels like there's loads of areas of the squad that are really cluttered, and then others that are quite thin, because then they're playing like Bobby de Cordova-Reid like on the wing, and I kind of feel like that's quite an obvious weak area. But when I look at it and I think, okay, what does the best team look like from this squad? I think it's actually pretty decent. Like, I think you should be able to get a solid midfield out of some combination of Reed, Lemina, Ongisa, Onuma, and Loftus-Cheek, who obviously is going to kind of be a hybrid attacker midfielder. I think Ademola Lookman has deserved a decent run of games in a top league for a long time. And I only switched on and saw like maybe 5-10 minutes of the Fulham West Brom game the other day. But he looked outrageous. I mean, like, he's one of those guys who, when he's on, he looks kind of unplayable and like he could turn into a real talent. And already he's taking nearly 4 shots a game. Like, obviously, early days, very small sample. But if he can keep that up, then they'll be in quite an interesting position because Mitrovic is a good, reliable forward. Even guys like Tom Cairney. Like, is Tom Cairney, like, a real Premier League player? Like, maybe not, but is he
exceptional against West Brom, though? He was really good against West Brom.
And that's the thing, like, is he a perfectly useful squad player for a team like Fulham? Like, definitely he is. So, I don't know. I think that if you can move guys like Dennis Odoi out of the team and ideally off the bench as well, you know, then you'll be in quite a decent position. And at that point, maybe we can talk about whether Parker needs to go. But I think that probably because they overperformed by getting promoted, because Scott Parker has such a strong relationship with the club, I think that he's probably got a bit more leeway there than Bilic does. Plus, yeah, I don't know. Like I do think that if those guys can come into form, like especially people like Ongisa, Loftus-Cheek, and Lookman, I do see kind of star power there that could propel them. Not really out of relegation trouble, but
difference makers in that bottom 5.
Yeah. Whereas with West Brom, I'm like, I really like Grady Diangana, but I don't think he is a difference maker quite yet. I really like Mateus Pereira, and he needs to be a difference maker now because I think he's 24, and maybe he can be, but there aren't that many people who can do it. With Fulham, it feels like there are 3 or 4 guys who could turn it on and win them a game, and so from that point of view, I'm a little bit more optimistic. But Jesus, I mean, some of the points tallies in this early part of the season are pretty bleak. And in a way, I feel like the reason we're talking about Parker in this group is because lots of the other clubs that are doing badly are either doing badly through no fault of their own, like Brighton and to some extent Burnley, or those clubs just have managers who are way more secure, like Dyche, or like Chris Wilder. You know, like those guys aren't going to get fired no matter how bad they are this season.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think Scott Parker really has enough credit in his bank with Fulham fans as well that they won't be sort of forcing the issue. Whereas I think West Brom fans don't have an awful lot of sort of affinity with Slaven Bilic. Obviously, only been there since last June, so are probably pushing more towards get him out the door. And I think some of Scott Parker's like tactical decisions have been actually fairly warranted this season. When he dropped Ruben Loftus-Cheek on the weekend, I think there was quite a few eyebrows raised as to whether that was the right call against West Brom, and it turned out to be the right call. I think the midfield of Ongisa and Lemina with Tom Cairney sat in front of them worked a lot better in terms of balance. I thought Anderson and what's the young lad that's coming from Manchester City's name again? Tosin. He looked way better alongside Joachim
He was
Anderson,
great in the Championship.
That could be an actual partnership that provides some solidity, because like you said, that's been a major issue, and we haven't even seen Alexander Mitrovic contributing in terms of goals yet, and we know he's a Premier League contributor. We've seen it over the past seasons of him playing in the Premier League that he can score goals at this level. So when he starts to get up to speed, Lookman starts to find his feet. If Ruben Loftus-Cheek can find his feet, there are promising signs at Fulham, whereas at West Brom, you look at it and you think, probably the wrong players are being picked. The tactics are all over the place. I don't see where a win comes from looking at their fixture list. So I think Scott Parker's way more secure than a man like Bilic, who I think will probably be the first out of the door. Does somebody else want to kick us off with Ollie? Pat, what? Because I don't really know whether I want to go straight in, because I'm trying to compose myself and think what I'm going to say about this situation. What are your thoughts on Ollie? He's the current favourite with the bookies, Pat, to lose his job. This video will go out, of course, after the Everton game, which is Saturday morning. A massive, massive game in his Manchester United career, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on Ollie? Is it time?
To be honest with you, I'm sort of ready for him to be put out of his misery, because I just feel like it's not reasonable to expect anyone to do a good job in these conditions where, they have a decent run of games and suddenly he's back on top and he's at the wheel again, and then everything kind of goes to shit and it's people baying for his blood. I can't quite work out what's gone wrong with them, because their defense was really good last season and it's terrible so far this season. I think
terrible.
Only 6 teams have conceded more shots, but more importantly, the shots they do concede. I mean, the problem they have is that when their defense breaks down, it breaks down in really obviously embarrassing ways. Whereas you can give up quite a lot of goals, but if it looks like you're doing things right, then you get a little bit more leeway than when people just run free from the halfway line, as we saw in the Champions League this week. Yeah, I don't know. I still think there's enough attack there that they'll probably be broadly fine. But it already looks like that kind of 3rd to 4th place spot that certainly I was predicting before the season is not gone, but extremely difficult for them to make up. I think they spent money really strangely in the summer. I wasn't particularly a fan of how they did that. And if Pochettino is just sitting out there, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to say to Ollie, look, it's been a long time. This hasn't really gone well. We haven't really achieved any level of consistency. We are going to make a change. I don't think that that's unreasonable, but I also think that if the assumption behind that is what's going wrong is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, then Man United are in for a rude awakening, because it clearly isn't. I don't know. It's not particularly organised. I just think Man United are rubbish this season. It's kind of hard to work out why. But when they aren't building on what was overall a successful year last year, I think you're within your rights to make a change.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, because I think there are echoes of last season a little bit, because I think people forget United had 11 points after 8 games last season, and was struggling big time then as well, and really turned it around towards the back end of the campaign. And there were calls for Ollie's head at the start of last season as well. They're definitely more vicious this time, I would say, and probably more warranted, yes. But I kind of partially agree with you, Pat. I think, look, he got the team into the position of the Champions League, which is what plenty of managers pre-Ollie have done. Wasn't supported in the way he needed to be supported. The players that have come in and were signed by the club, if you analyse them, have had no impact on the team. Donny, probably Ollie's fault, isn't getting enough game time. Cavani is only just coming to fitness because he had to have 2 weeks worth of quarantine.
Do you think the Donny stuff's a bit weird, though, Tomlinson? That this many, people expect him to have put up X amount of minutes already. It was always going to take a little time to embed him into the side, right? Particularly when Ollie can't put together a competent attack at the minute. So I do find, the beating him over the head with the Donny stick a bit weird, yeah.
Yeah, it is very difficult. Then you've got Telles, who had COVID, of course. Palestri, who is only joining as an under-23. And Diallo, who doesn't join until January. So you look at the impact of the summer signings, and it's null at the moment, which has been appalling. There could not have been a worse pre-season for United. I think we had a 4-day pre-season, pre the season, which is nowhere near acceptable. Pogba got COVID. We had the Harry Maguire situation. Overall, the build-up to the season was an utter disaster, and it's really showing. United's performances have been absolutely appalling. 15th in the league is not acceptable. Can drop as low as 17th on Saturday, and the highest we can move to is 12th. So there is huge pressure on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to sort this situation out, and the defending has been atrocious. The game against Istanbul midweek was one of the worst defensive displays I've had the misfortune of watching in maybe a decade at Manchester United. The first goal is Sunday League stuff. The second goal, everybody gets drawn into the ball. Luke Shaw's not even in the picture. And this comes off the back of 2 really good results in the Champions League. PSG away, can't be underestimated how good that result was. 5-0 against Bundesliga leading Leipzig, can't be underestimated how good that result was. And they've been masking some tragic form. Tragic form. No wins at home this season is absolutely unacceptable. A 6-1 battering by Tottenham Hotspur at home, unacceptable. So as soon as that Champions League form runs out, even more question marks start to get asked. And it ran out yesterday. And I don't want to blow hot and cold because, I was really praising Ollie after that Leipzig result, and he got it spot on. Tactics were perfect against Julian Nagelsmann. And the trouble is with Ollie, at the moment, he's getting more games wrong than he's getting right. I think last season was the opposite. He got more right than he got wrong. Really positive in big games, won the majority of his major battles, maybe struggled to break down some of the smaller teams, but towards the back end of the season was almost unbeatable. I think we went 20 games unbeaten. This season, it's the reverse. We're struggling in the big games. We still can't break down the little teams. And it feels like he's starting to get more decisions wrong on the pitch than he is getting right. And I don't want to say the players look like they're quitting on him, but I think certain members of the squad are starting to question what the idea is, what the attacking plan is, what is the midfield balance, what's the defensive structure. And fans are starting to question that too. So I think the pressure going into the Everton game is as big as it's ever been on Ollie. And like I said about Bilic, the international break is always sacking season, and it's made worse by the fact Pochettino is out of a job and is now available to bring in without paying a compensation package to Tottenham because that contract has run out. I feel sorry for Ollie because I think he's been badly hung out to dry by the board in terms of recruitment, but equally, right now, it's just not good enough, Hamster.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, strip away the external factors, would Pochettino get better performances, better results with the talent that Ollie has available to him right now? And the answer is probably yes. I think you made some interesting observations there that Ollie's actually a good manager when it comes to reacting to someone else's game plan. When the opposition have a strong philosophy that they're probably not going to change, although Leipzig, City, they can be fluid in games, let's not discount that. But he's good at reacting to someone else's tactics. When it comes to United putting their stamp, I'm going to say in inverted commas, on games, you have struggled. Struggled for originality, struggled for just coherence in any part of the pitch, and that sort of emphasised by the fact that Paul Pogba's been moved out to the left in various games, and he's been at the base of midfield, and he's been in attacking midfield, and you feel for him to an extent just watching him, because quite clearly he doesn't know what he's doing. But I don't want to get transfixed on Paul Pogba. It's definitely not just him, is it? The centre half pairing that were so impressive last season, how can they all of a sudden be leaving Demba Ba on the halfway line, like you said, without one of them, showing a bit of game management? Fred's been good. I'm not really sort of galvanised my thoughts. I'm kind of going through it on a player-by-player basis in my head. But Fred's been good. I suppose he's been not a revelation this season, but in the last year, he's at least shown a bit of nous that you've maybe lacked in midfield. But essentially, I find you pretty dull to watch unless you're playing against a great team, and then Ollie's all of a sudden turns into prime Pep. So yeah, I do think it's perhaps time to go. But I think he can leave with his head held high. Like, he's done a reasonable job. I don't think it will damage his stock moving forward. But yeah, is his exit like the full solution, like you both said? Probably not.
No. Yeah, definitely agree with that. I personally still would give him time. I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference to bring Pochettino in right now, and that's if we can even get Pochettino. I think lots of people are sort of going, United will just go and pick Pochettino up. You just think United is that easy for United? If I was Pochettino, I'd be looking at it going, I could wait another maybe 6 months and a bigger job than Manchester United's going to be available.
I don't know, man. If I were Pochettino, I'd start to get a bit worried. Like, he's been out of work for such a long time. I'd probably be just ready to go back. And also, I'd look at the Man United squad and I'd think, there's a lot to work with here. Like, okay, here's the thing. It's not like there's an obvious solution that I think Solskjaer is missing. I do think it's weirdly constructed. I think when we were talking about Donny van de Beek and it's going to take some time for him to bed in. But also, there's not an obvious setup that gets the best out of Pogba, Fernandes and Van de Beek all at the same time. Like, it's hard to work out how you're going to get those guys into a team together and still have a defensive balance. But yeah, I would look at people like Rashford and Martial and think, yeah, I can definitely get something out of this. And of course, with fullbacks, Pochettino's record in making fullbacks a lot better has been pretty sensational. I mean, to me though, it just still always comes down to squad building. So I would rather build under Pochettino than Solskjaer, because I don't think Solskjaer is going to be the man for the long term. And I do think that, like, I don't think Pochettino has been great in the transfer window in the past, but Man United have been about as bad as it's possible to be in the transfer window, and so I feel like there's no real risk in letting Pochettino have a bit more say. Like, you look at this summer, they spent £75 million, and you just think, Donny van de Beek's a good player. In fact, like, I like most of these signings. I'm not really sure about Alex Telles. I probably wouldn't have signed Cavani, but, you know, for 75 mil, you could have gone out and got, like, Thomas Partey and Sergio Reguilon, and that would have basically fixed, like, 2 major positions for you, or even just Højbjerg and Reguilon. And I do think that with the difference between everyone talking about what an amazing job Mourinho's doing and how, like, Ole is kind of getting worse and worse, could easily be the opposite way round if Man United had signed those 2 key players and Spurs hadn't. Like, I think that getting quality players on the pitch is actually 90% of the time more important than the manager. So part of my reasoning for getting Pochettino in is that I think I have no faith in Man United's ability to improve this squad, so you might as well let Pochettino get the players he wants and see if that works better.
Yeah, I think the issue, though, is that there's no guarantee Pochettino gets the players he wants. Ole certainly didn't.
Sure.
Ole got none of his summer targets. He got none of his winter targets. He wanted Haaland, failed. He wanted Bellingham, failed. He wanted Reguilon, failed. He wanted Sancho, failed. So I don't think if Poch comes in, there's any guarantee he gets the players that he wants.
Joe, any of those players that you failed while pursuing them, particularly Bellingham and Haaland, who we've touched upon before, right? You brought it before on previous episodes of Sunday Vibes, where Manchester United have pulled out all the stops to sign these 2. Do you think they would have been more compelled to join United had someone like Poch been in charge?
Yeah, that's my question.
I don't necessarily think so, because I think the reason we didn't sign Reguilon was because we weren't willing to put the clause in there, which was he was going to join Manchester United if the clause wasn't a big problem. I think Haaland, part of the reason he wanted to join Manchester United was Solskjaer, to be totally honest, with the Norwegian connection. Solskjaer was flying out to see him, see his family on a regular basis. Again, the clause in his contract, massive issue for Manchester United. Bellingham, maybe, but I think he had his heart. I was reading a Times article with him this week where he did a fantastic interview, actually. Well worth a read, but he says that he had his heart set on Borussia Dortmund because of their level of production of players throughout the years. Fine, I can accept that. So I think it wouldn't have made a huge difference. I think the issue remains recruitment, remains the board, remains the lack of overall vision, and it will remain that even if Pochettino's in charge. In 18 months, if Pochettino comes in now, we'll be having the exact same discussion we're having now, where he gets backed for the first summer window, gets into the Champions League, and then the summer after that, no backing. Exactly what's happened with Ole will happen with Poch, and it's tiresome, and something has to change. We've gone through 4 or 5 managers now since Ferguson, and it's the same every 3 years. So I really think Pochettino would have a positive impact in the short term, but in the long term, it will be the exact same, no change. So it's very depressing.
But I mean, when he first came to Tottenham, right? It's been well documented that they didn't perform great defensively to start with. It took him sort of 18 months to really drill into the players how important it was to press. It took him a little while to express.
He isn't going to get 18 months to drill it in at Manchester United.
But these players, I don't think, need as long as that, is the point I'm sort of arriving at. And I do think that your talent currently in the side, their skill sets are quite simpatico with that of Mauricio Pochettino. Like, you can see Greenwood, Martial and Rashford like pressing for their lives at the front. You can see him playing a double pivot of Fred and maybe another player. Maybe it is someone that's slightly more progressive with the ball that comes in. But I think while there's a sort of, if you drew a Venn diagram, while there's a sort of decent overlap between having these young players who are he'd still be able to mould in his image, experiencing not their peaks or maybe arriving at their peaks. I think it'd be wise to get him in that time.
Yeah, I agree. I really love Pochettino, and I definitely think he would get something very, very positive out of this squad in a 24-month period. It's the post 24-month period, post 18 months that I really worry, because I just think.
Do you not think Ollie's been given the time? He might not have been given the resources or the players, and they are obviously huge components. But do you not think he's been given enough time to put something better out on the pitch?
I think he's been given time, but I don't, like you just said, I don't think he's been given the resources. Yes, he spent £200 million or £250 million, which is clearly all of the people are going to be commenting saying, oh, he was given £250 million to spend. Yeah, but he spent that money to get into the Champions League. We got into the Champions League and we got no backing. That's the simple fact of it, to take the club to the next level.
You spent 75 mil this summer. Like, that is enough to do quite a lot in the transfer window.
We spent £75 million, but none of the players have played a game.
Yeah, but that's my point.
Like COVID, Cavani isn't fit. Was Cavani an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer target? Probably not.
But that doesn't matter. Cavani was free. Like, Cavani's kind of, I mean, like, yes, there are wages, but Cavani's not as relevant as some of the other use of resources here. Like, I mean, 75 million is enough to get like at least a couple of players in who could clearly make this side better. And
I totally agree with that, but I don't think that the right players were brought in. And I don't think that's Ollie's fault.
But you don't think he could have said, like, I just don't want Van der Beek. Like, I don't want him at all. I want to spend less on someone who fits my needs.
He's not going to say that, is it? If Van der Beek if it's Van der Beek or no one, which it probably is at Manchester United, he's going to take Van der Beek.
I mean, if that's the case, though, that's just like insane, because Van der Beek isn't even like a big name. Like, you could. Surely, if he'd said to the board, I don't want to spend 35 million on Van der Beek, I want to spend 25 million on a defensive midfielder, like, surely they'd be amenable to that.
Yeah, but he also said at the start of the window he wanted like a right winger. We didn't get a right winger. We didn't sign a right winger. Like, I'm sure he said to the board he wanted a centre back. We didn't get a centre back. The targets that were brought in were not the players to fit Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's system, and now he's having to adapt.
Obviously, it's a hard question for you to answer, but is he reacting to the fact that he's not getting his primary targets in a sufficient manner, or Manchester United reacting as a club in a sufficient way? Because, like, that's what big clubs do ultimately, isn't it? They see more players slip through their fingers than they secure, and it just feels like there was no strong contingencies. Yes, you didn't get Jadon Sancho. You pissed Dortmund off earlier in the year by not, meeting that deadline. So have a better plan B or C.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I totally agree with you, but that's not Ollie's job. Like, that's the board's job, the recruitment's job, Ed Woodward's job, Matt Judge's job. Like, and it has been for 8-9 years, and not one time have they got it overall.
But what is his profile of player? Like, say with Jurgen Klopp, he was given 4 years, wasn't he, to assemble a much more competent side. But like, it was easy to recruit for him, or easier, because he had a discernible style of play. Like, I don't know who is a good player for Ollie at this point in time. Like, I can't go and get suggest a £20 million player who he could turn into a £60 million player, because...
Yeah, that might be true. But at the end of the day, I don't believe that the board has ever recruited correctly for the manager that's come through the door, necessarily. And what you can't say about Ollie is that Ollie has done a good job, in my opinion, getting this squad into the position it's in now, in terms of offloading players and bringing players in. The average age is way down. He's got rid of some significant wages in the likes of Alexis Sanchez, Fellaini when he was here. He's got rid of, maybe positive, maybe negative, depending on your opinion, Romelu Lukaku. He's got rid of Ashley Young. Phil Jones is looking like he's going to leave in December. Sergio Romero is not going to play for the club again. So overall, his squad management and squad building hasn't been terrible. But the players that have come in, are they what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wanted? Probably not, and I don't believe that's Ollie's fault, because it happened to Jose, it happened to Louis van Gaal, it happened, whether or not it was his fault, to David Moyes. So overall, the problem doesn't lie with the manager, it lies higher than him, it lies with the board. And that's something that is continuously going to happen until there's a major change at a higher level.
Yeah, I think it's hard to decipher, isn't it? Because I think it's easy to criticise him too much, but I also sometimes find myself wondering, like, does he get away with a fair amount? Like, is there strong wave of sympathy that's kind of caused by the board's failings as well, because I find it very hard to believe that even
the board deserve no sympathy.
I find it very hard to believe that even a competent manager, a competent one, does any worse with this team right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I agree that tactically we're all over the place at the moment, and it's not been good enough from the players that are currently at the club. And I would 100% agree with you. But the recruitment issue is not an issue from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. The recruitment issue is 7 years in the making under multiple different managers from the same board. So it's not an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer issue in terms of recruitment. Tactically, yeah, totally agree with you. I think we are all over the place. Like I said earlier, the defence looks totally chaotic. There's a lack of midfield balance and there's a lack of attacking patterns. But recruitment-wise, that doesn't lie at Ole's door. That lies elsewhere at Manchester United. And I think all Manchester United fans know that there are problems behind the scenes that no manager is able to fix.
Would you
in my
take
opinion.
not Bruno? Would you take Brendan Rodgers or Nuno Espirito Santos if they were offered to you tomorrow?
Over Ole?
Yeah.
I think Brendan Rodgers would do a really good job at Manchester United, but United are not going to get Brendan Rodgers. He's ex-Liverpool. He's probably on a huge amount of money at Leicester with a long-term contract that he's only just re-upped. So United are not going to pay that money to get him out of a contract whilst also sacking Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And also Brendan Rodgers is probably thinking to himself, I'm building something at Leicester here. I've got really good recruitment over the last 24 months that fit into the style of play that I want to put forward. Why would I join Manchester United? And fair play to him. As for Nuno, it's probably a very similar situation. He's got all of the players that he wanted. He's got a very good relationship with the board. He plays in a very set style of football that wouldn't be simpatico with the way Manchester United fans want to see played. So I don't think either of those managers are realistic targets for Manchester United. I think there's two names on the table. One of them's Pochettino, which will be continuously linked and feels the most likely, and the other is Max Allegri. And I don't think Max Allegri is necessarily the right fit for how Manchester United fans want to see football played. But either of them right now look like a positive addition, don't they? Having said that, and as I said earlier, I just don't see a massive amount changing with whatever manager comes in the long term. In the short term, sure, results will improve, and then we'll see the exact same situation happen in 2 years' time as we're seeing that has happened to Ole this season. I think it's very, very sad, and I feel quite sorry for Ole, it has to be said.
Fair play.
Should we move on then to some quick fire questions, because I've been rambling about Manchester United for about 20 minutes. This one was sent in by Swagato. It's back. Shout out Swagato Saka. He says, which club should sign Eriksen this January? Obviously not in favour under Antonio Conte at the moment. Do we think he's actually going to leave? It feels like such a weird signing, this Pato.
I think he probably will leave just because, in recent weeks, Barella's been playing as a 10, pretty much. Got an absolutely outrageous assist.
Oh my god, outrageous.
It was genuinely incredible. And he's obviously just like a perfect kind of Conte player, like incredibly high energy, does exactly what he's told, can play a variety of roles, is young and going to improve. He's kind of the perfect player for that interside going forward. I think they probably will try and offload him, but I'm not sure that they'll get real money for him in January. I don't think anyone's going to go and give him the kind of contract that he'd want and pay a transfer fee. What they might be able to do is loan him out. And if you're going to loan him out, I actually think that then there are quite a few interesting homes for him, not least of which would be Arsenal. I think Arsenal would be quite an interesting...
That would be controversial, mate.
Well, if they still have, this significant creativity problem, if a move to a 4 at the back hasn't entirely happened, or, I don't know, they just haven't really been able to solve their shot issue, then they might say, you know what, we can bring this guy in on 120, 150k a week, just for a short loan until the summer, and that would probably not be the worst thing. I still think that he's capable of being an elite creator. He's obviously a goal threat. His set piece delivery is excellent. He's previously played in an excellent pressing side and has shown his ability to be an above average participant in that press. I think that Christian Eriksen probably could find quite a few interesting places to go. I mean, even if Everton as well are within touching distance of a Champions League spot, then they might say, if James Rodriguez gets injured, we're in serious trouble, because the only other guy we've got who can pass into the box is Alex Iwobi, and he's a totally different sort of player. He's nowhere near that level as well. Maybe we go out and spend a bit of money in the short term on Eriksen. So I don't know. I think that they'll probably try and shift him, and I think that the going rate might be fairly low, but I can't see anyone buying him because he went to Inter to get a big payday, and no one's going to match it as far as I'm concerned. Not on a 4 to 5 year contract in the middle of a season disrupted by coronavirus, where everybody's got a massive financial black hole and a load of clubs are rebuilding and don't want to sign a 28, 29-year-old.
Yeah, I saw PSG linked with him on loan with an option to buy earlier, and I thought, that's very PSG. Yeah, like that sort of not poor, but recently their signings have been questionable. I think it's fair to say, especially in the midfield department.
I mean, he'd be a massive upgrade though, wouldn't he? On the likes of
Draxler,
Draxler, who they're trying.
But they'd have to get they'd have to get rid of a player like Draxler to then bring in a player like Eriksen.
But they've been trying to shift Draxler for a couple of windows now, and I think they also understand Di Maria's not going to live forever, and Sarabia's not really been a key contributor. I think he's the kind of player you could see Tuchel kind of enjoying. But yeah, PSG I feel like are doing a kind of poor man's version of what Juventus used to do. You know, we'll pick up all these outstanding free agents around Europe, or these guys we can get for cheap fees, but they don't quite understand where the sweet spot is between a guy who is an undervalued bargain and someone who is just cheap. They don't really understand the difference. But
what about Man City? Obviously never replaced David Silva in the summer, and maybe a slight lack of creativity there, or do you just think as soon as Gabby Jesus and Aguero are back fit, I know Gabby Jesus played midweek, that'll kind of solve itself out?
I don't see what problem he really fixes there. I mean, I know what you're saying. It's depth. It's not a particular issue to have, but he's not the kind of guy who plays as a hybrid forward and creative midfielder, which is kind of what Pep wants all of those guys to do, except for De Bruyne. You know, Foden is just as often running in behind as he is lurking around the edge of the penalty area and trying to create, and the same goes for guys like Mahrez. So I don't know, it wouldn't be the worst idea. They have the money to do it, and again on a loan, I think that it wouldn't be a stupid move. I just don't think that it will happen.
Yeah, all right, let's get the next one then. Mr. Kirky Simmons, I think that's how you say it. It says, quick fire question: in their prime, which two strikers would you take? Villa, Eto'o, Forlan, Shevchenko, or Crespo? Hamster?
Okay, I mean, it'd be lying if I said I watched Shevchenko and Crespo when they're in their sort of heyday, right? So for me, Eto'o is probably the best name out of that bunch. Probably ability-wise, Eto'o, Villa, Diego Forlan, of course, pretty irresistible when he was in Spain. If I was going to take two, it'd probably be Villa and
exactly
Eto'o.
what I would have said, Pato.
Yeah, possibly that, though. Shevchenko's much more of a prolific scorer than Villa. But I prefer Villa as a player. I mean, I wouldn't really play them together, though, because they both want to kind of play off the left. But, yeah, I don't know. I think Forlan is quite a long way down on this list, even though I always loved Forlan. He's not the level of striker that these other guys were. Eto'o was a goal machine literally everywhere.
Yeah, all right. One more quick fire before we get personal then. I just wanted to ask this one for you, Pato, actually. Okay. This one was sent in by Georgios. He says, is Gabriel the best centre-back in the league now that Van Dijk is injured? I think it's a fair assessment to make given his performances so far this season.
Is that George Wright's burner account?
I think he's been very good. He's a really good signing. I think, in a way, life is a little bit easier for him because Arsenal have played a three at the back. And when you're playing in a three at the back, you just have less space to cover. And so you tend to look better as a centre-back. It's like we always say defenders look better at Atletico Madrid or under Jose Mourinho or under Sean Dyche because they are protected. On the other hand, he's made a lot of interventions, and he's an extremely good tackler. He's not particularly reckless. All of that said, I think he should have been sent off against Man United the other day.
Do you? What, for the tackle with the second yellow on Greenwood in the corner?
When he got his soul taken by Mason Greenwood. And then kind of... I mean, it wasn't that bad, but if he'd got a yellow, there could have been absolutely no complaint whatsoever. As soon as it happened, I said, he's off. But I'm absolutely delighted with the signing. The best centre back in the league is pretty strong. I now I think about it, it's kind of hard to think of centre backs who've really excelled so far this season. But if he continues at this rate, he looks like he's going to be a genuinely top class centre back for the first time since Koscielny, really, for Arsenal. So yeah, I'm delighted with him. But to say he's the best centre back in the league right now, I mean, like there are people like Laporte. There are, the Wolves guys. Like there are quite a few people around who might have something to say about that. But I couldn't be happier with how that transfer's gone.
Yeah.
I think people are waking up to the fact that Ligue 1 is pretty unrivaled at the minute in terms of like a defensive production factory. Like, who's that now? Gabriel, Fofana. Who's the other kid you signed from Saint Etienne as well? Yeah, William Saliba. Sorry, I missed that first time round. So yeah, if you're a club in the top half of the Premier League, just get in Ligue 1 to pick up some more defensive talent. Like, I mean, Kwande was at Bordeaux before he was at Sevilla, right? When Sevilla spent quite a large amount of money on him, memory serves me correctly, but he's looking incredible as well on the Spanish coast. So
the only thing is the prices are going up. So like Fofana, when Fofana went for that amount of money, a lot of Saint Etienne fans were saying, we don't rate this guy as highly as we rated Saliba. This is an awful lot of money. And Arsenal paid a lot for Saliba as well. I mean, really, Gabriel is the only one of those who went for what I'd call a cheap fee.
It's definitely a bit of dumb luck how quickly Fofana's settled in, because you can't like attribute too much credit to Brendan Rodgers. He's obviously more protected in a 3, which is great. It's a sensible way to kind of embed him into the side. But he played like 14 games for Saint Etienne before he arrived for 35 mil. So I imagine a lot of that was just owing to lip service. But yeah, he's looked incredible at the start of the season. What other point was I going to make? I don't know, actually.
All right, let's finish with a personal question then. This one was sent in by Anna, and she says, a food that you absolutely cannot stand.
Ooh.
I'll go straight in. Mushrooms. Absolutely disgusting. Have no right to be on a plate. Anything that you could pick up and get killed by immediately. No, I'm not having it. Just tastes like the bottom of my shoe. Don't like it. Unless it's seasoned and like chuck loads of flavours on, then it's pointless, fruitless, rubbish.
Wow. Strong.
Fruitless.
Yeah.
So, I hate bananas. Absolutely hate bananas on the subject of fruit. Like, I'll still eat them. Obviously,
I've seen you eat loads of bananas.
I know they're very good for you. And I like to do a lot of jogging, and they're good for that little burst of energy, aren't they? Half an hour before a jog, and they're not too filling. But everything about them repulses me, particularly when they are like, it makes my skin shudder when I'm peeling them. When I see those little fibres of skin, banana skin, still clinging to the banana inside its disgusting yellow shell. When they're slightly bruised, then you have to mess up your hand pouring the bruised part away. I just think they're gross.
Wow. All right, Pato.
That's really strong. I don't really like oysters. I'm not a big fan. I've never quite got on board with oysters, and I think the people who are like, I love oysters, but then they like swallow them without chewing, I think that's like a tacit acknowledgement that they're a bit disgusting. I've also got to say, like, it's not like I can't stand it. Like, I have enjoyed it in the past, but my least favourite fish is salmon. I think salmon is the most overrated fish.
Wow.
The thing is about salmon is it smells fishier than other fish, and what you're taught when you're buying fish is the fishier it smells, the more off it is. But I also just don't enjoy it as much as I enjoy other kinds of fish. So like, but I can tolerate it. So I'd say a lot of shellfish I'm not really a huge fan of. I don't really want like mussels or cockles.
Who taught you about buying fish? I missed that class.
About buying fish, you want to look for a really clear eye. If the eye is cloudy, then it means the fish is old. And obviously as well, there's like the there's like a golden window to buy fish. You either want it to be super super fresh, or you actually want it to be a little bit older, because in between there's a period of rigor mortis where your fish gets really tough.
Whoa, good knowledge, good fish knowledge. Okay, should we wrap it up there then, talking about fish? If you've got any questions for next week's show, put them in the comments below or send them to us on Twitter. Chris usually puts a tweet out on a Wednesday or a Tuesday looking for questions, so get involved over there. Hamster, anything to point to? I know you've done an FD Explained.
Yes, the 4th or 5th Explain we've done. We're trying to make that series a little bit more consistent in November. It's just a different kind of strand, isn't it? I think Patrick's working on one for Euro Football Daily as well on Barcelona, right, Pat?
Yeah, you might have heard about this recently, but Barcelona need to trim their wage bill by nearly 200 million euros or they could go bankrupt. So basically, they need to cut the equivalent of Tottenham's wage bill off their wage bill.
Wow.
That'll be Lionel Messi out the door then. Either way, just a quick reminder that this episode was brought to you by Budweiser, the official beer partner of the Premier League. And you can click the link in the description below to check out Kings of the Premier League. Thanks very much for watching. We'll catch you later. Bye.